Actually, I'm gonna. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is our webinar on getting ready for the season of creation and the Great Big Green Week, which is the initiative of the Climate Coalition. And we're delighted that Grace Fisher and Mary Caulfield for the Climate Coalition are here with us today. I'm Jo Chamberlain from the Church of England. So just a little few words about the season of creation, and then we'll hand over to Grace and Mary. So the season of creation starts on the 1st of September and finishes on the 4th of October. And it's an annual thing, and it's been really gaining in momentum over the last few years. It's also an ecumenical initiative and an international initiative. So it's not just the Church of England by any means. It has huge support from around the world. It starts on the 1st of September with a global day of prayer for the environment and finishes on the 4th of October, which is the Saint's Day of St. Francis of Assisi. And in that time, it's the time where churches can set aside time to really treasure and value and honour and celebrate God's gift of creation. And lots of churches find that it's a really good time to have a focus on creation as God's gift and appreciate it and be thankful for it. And it often links up with harvest as well, which is another, it's a good link thinking about the gifts of God, the fruits of his creation. So this year, the theme for Season of Creation is Listen to the Voice of Creation. And I'm just going to read a little bit of stuff from the website, and then I will post a link to this website in the chat so you can find it later. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many have become familiar with the concept of being muted in conversations. How many times have someone said, "You're on mute"? But the Season of Creation team who've come up with the ideas for this year are saying that many voices are muted in the public discourse around climate change and the ethics of earth keeping. And those voices are those who suffer the impacts of climate change the most. They're often the voices of people who hold generational wisdom about how to live gratefully within the limits of the land. These are the voices of a diminishing diversity of more than human species. It's the voice of the earth. And so the focus is trying to listen to these voices that we don't often hear. And there's a symbol for this year, the burning bush. The burning bush is the symbol for the Season of Creation 2022. Today, the prevalence of unnatural fires are a sign of the devastating effects that climate change has on the most vulnerable of our planet. Creation cries out as forests crackle, animals flee, and people are forced to migrate due to the fires of injustice. But on the contrary, the fire that called Moses as he tended his flock on the Mount of Horeb did not consume or destroy the bush. This flame of the Spirit revealed God's presence. This holy fire affirmed that God heard the cries of all who suffered and promised to be with us as we followed in our faith to deliverance from injustice. In this season of creation, the symbol of God's Spirit calls us to listen to the voice of creation. So hopefully that will be inspirational for some of you for ideas of what you might do. And we hope that you will be doing events at any time during the Season of Creation. Although the Great Big Green Week is a specific week, actually, if you want to do something at a different time during the season, you can still link it up with the Climate Coalition and make it all part of the same effect. So whatever you want to do and whenever in that season that fits with your how you work liturgically and worshipfully in your church, however that works for you, you can make that work for the Great Big Green Week and for the Season of Creation altogether. So that's all I'm going to say now, and I'm going to hand over to Grace. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Jo, and thanks so much to everyone for having us today. Myself and Mary are very excited to be here, and it's really nice to see so many different people from around the UK joining the session today. As Jo mentioned, we're here to talk a bit about the Great Big Green Week, but I'll just do a couple introductions. So I'll introduce myself, and then I'll let Mary introduce herself, and then we'll launch in. So my name's Grace Fisher, my pronouns are she, her, and I am the community organiser at the Climate Coalition. So my role is all about supporting community groups and individuals to engage with our campaigns, such as the Great Big Green Week. And I'll pass just to Mary to introduce herself as well.
Hi, so I am Mary Caulfield. I am the project manager of Great Big Green Week for the Climate Coalition, I'm also a long-time Anglican and have for many years been talking about climate in church, and I'm very, very excited to see so many people on this call, because it's just really lovely to know how passionate you all are about looking after God's creation in this way. And we would love for you to use your skills and your networks and your communities to help Great Big Green Week really demonstrate your love for God's creation.
Absolutely. So what I will do is I will just magically, hopefully it will work, share my screen, and you should be able to see a nice Great Big Green Week slide. So as Joe mentioned earlier, the Great Big Green Week is essentially a celebration of climate and nature, much as the season of creation. We are celebrating everything that's happening in terms of action on climate change and protection of nature across the UK. And we'll be celebrating that from the 24th of September to the 2nd of October. And we would love for people to get involved from the Church of England. So just to give you a brief introduction as to who we are in general, we're the people behind the Great Big Green Week. We're the Climate Coalition. And essentially we are a coalition of different members across the kind of environment and broader sector. So anyone from like the National Trust to WWF and the Wildlife Trusts to the Women's Institute, Islamic Relief, the Woodland Trust. There are tons of members that basically come together and create a stronger voice by uniting and coming up with different campaigns and moments and having discussions around climate change. So we came up with this concept called the Great Big Green Week. And as I mentioned, it's essentially all about standing up for nature and fighting climate change and coming together in our communities around the UK to stand up and say, hey, like, look at all the great things that we're doing, and we want to basically come together to celebrate that. We want to energize and connect people across the country, but not only doing that during the week, but also helping them build relationships and optimism and skills that they need to grow their power and also stand up for nature and fight for climate change together. We know there's lots of networks here already of people working in eco churches and representing their churches in that way. And we want to use this week as an opportunity for you to meet others who are like-minded, perhaps within the church's networks or faith networks more broadly, but also across lots of different sectors within your locality. So this is not the first time that we've run Great Big Green Week. We actually ran the Great Big Green Week last year, and I'm sure some of you may have been involved. Last year, we saw over 5,000 events happening, just individual events, and over 202 local Green Weeks or week-long climate festivals being hosted throughout the week. We saw a whole host of activities taking place, from plastic-free picnics to schools conferences to theatre performances, community markets, art trails, you name it, it probably happened during the Great Big Green Week. And this year, obviously, it's really important to get your help and support to make the Great Big Green Week even greater, bigger and greener. Now, we do all of this because we know that there's a huge diversity of people who care about nature and fighting climate change. And everyone is welcome in this discussion and this celebration, because we know that there are influencers and people engaging in issues around climate change and protecting nature in loads of different ways. So we're not prescriptive in what you get up to, as long as it's got a vague climate or nature theme. We'd love to see you getting involved. Now, obviously, we're talking about churches and Church of England here. So I wanted to give you some great examples of what we saw last year, just to kind of get you thinking about maybe what you could do this year if you want to be involved. So we saw a huge variety of things. We had obviously like very traditional Climate Sunday services, but we also saw churches being a hub for activity or being key organisers within Great Big Green Weeks happening in communities. So not only were they hosted within the churches themselves and in a faith setting, but churches often kind of connected people together with litter picks in the local parish or prayer labyrinths on creation and climate change. There were harvest shared meals and film nights, lots of information displays in churches, green fun days in and around churchyards, forest churches, and lots of tree of hope displays. So people creating trees with messages of hope as the leaves on the trees as well. So there was loads of different things that happened last year, and obviously we would love to see more of that stuff happening this year. And churches and people within the church tend to play a big part in bringing people together in a community. So we'd love to see you being involved. Now, what does that mean for communities in the Great Big Green Week? Well, community group engagement is a really integral part of the Great Big Green Week and the success, because it's all about these community groups coming together and organising the events themselves. So as an individual, perhaps part of your church and your eco-church representatives, you could either organise an individual event at your church, or, as I mentioned before, you can actually coordinate a whole green week. So this is like a series of individual events that come together to create a green week in your locality. Now, obviously, community groups play a key role, and individuals within those communities, in building those connections locally. So networking with people locally, getting shared support, promoting events. So communities are an integral part of the Great Big Green Week, and we couldn't do it without our community groups. What we're also encouraging people to do this year is to think about outside of that climate bubble, outside of the people maybe you have traditional conversations with around climate change, and encouraging new people into the discussion. As was mentioned earlier, there are obviously voices that haven't been heard within the climate discussion. So how can we bring these new voices in, reach new people and audiences by using the networks that we have as individuals and bringing people in together to celebrate and share what's happening on climate and nature local to you. Now, we have a whole host of different resources available to you as organisers or individuals who want to get involved in the Great Big Green Week. These will be going live hopefully next week, which is really exciting. We've got some updated resources for people. So we've got an organiser's guide. So if you're thinking about running an individual event or a Great Big Green Week event yourself, we have a whole guide that can tell you more about what you need to do to run a Green Week or run an individual event. We also have an A to Z of ideas document, so a way for you to kind of get some ideas about what potentially you could do for your Green Week. If you're like, I'm really stuck and I'm not really sure what I could do, we've created a big document with loads of different ideas. But obviously, do not feel like you are stuck in that box of those things. We love to hear loads of different and creative ideas, so don't let that limit you in your thinking for what you could do. We'll also have a guide to how you can encourage your MP to get involved. We think this is a really important part of Great Big Green Week, as it's really important to be having not only the discussions about what's happening locally to you and what communities are doing, but also showing local MPs and local politicians what's happening and encouraging them to see the importance of climate change, keeping it on their radar, but also thinking about what change we need to see in the broader society to tackle climate change and protect nature as well. We'll also have lots of other guides coming soon, and we're just working on developing a schools pack as well. So we know that lots of churches have connections with local schools. So we'll be making sure we're sharing some extra resources of things that you could talk to your local school about getting involved in as well. So there'll be plenty of resources. One other thing I think it might be really useful for you all is a specific training session is just around how to run a Green Week. So we're going to have a session where we'll do some training and bring in some organisers of events last year to come and talk about their experiences, what they learned, share their top tips and thoughts, but also kind of talking through those basics of how to run a Green Week, what the basics are that you need to think about and how to do that. In every one of our training sessions, they're also followed by some networking. So it's an opportunity for you to meet with other people local to you. We know that these events do not just happen in their own silos. It's really important to network with other people locally. So you can meet with people within your regions, share ideas, share your worries, concerns, questions about how to run events, and meet other people and chat. So it's a really great opportunity to engage with other people who are doing the same things as you. And I'll make sure I share the link to how you can sign up, which is on our Eventbrite, in the chat in a minute as well, so you can see where to sign up. But I am certain that Joe will also send that link around as well afterwards. Not only do we have training and resources available to you, but we also have some very exciting funding available to community groups. So this is open to anyone thinking about running a Green Week or an event, and looking for a little bit of funding to support that. Maybe it's around hiring a space, providing a few bits of equipment to help you run those events, or having promotional materials. If there are things that you're looking for and you don't have funds to support you to do that, then we have a community fund available. We have a range of grant sizes available to community groups, so anything from £200 to £10,000. You can basically apply, and again I'll share the link to where you can find more information in a minute. Our bigger grant pots, so that's from anything from £5,000 to £10,000, that is open until the 8th of May, so you can apply to that funding until then. But if you're looking for funding between £200 and £5,000, that is open until the 30th of June. So you've got a bit more time to think about maybe what you want to do, write a proposal and send it in to us, and we'll see if we can give you some funding for that. So please do apply if money and funding is a barrier to you getting involved, or you think it could add a level to your events for Great Big Green Week, then please do take a look at our funding, as we'd love to support lots of different events happening. Once you've done all of your thinking and come up with some fantastic ideas, maybe got some funding for them, the next step will be about adding and sharing events on our Great Big Green Week website. We are just in the process of updating that, and we're hoping that next week that will be live, and you'll be able to essentially register your events that are happening on our website. So that means that people can find events local to them. So you just add your event in, and then you'll be able to search events happening locally. So it's a really great tool to promote events happening local to you, but also a really great way to hear about other events happening as well locally to you. So perhaps there might actually be a series of smaller events happening within the same town, and maybe you can join up and create a Green Week and help each other by promoting those events locally as well. So that will be up and live hopefully next week, so you'll be able to add your own events and also see what events are happening locally to you. So if you don't have the capacity or time to run an event during the Great Big Green Week, you can still join in by attending events. So that will be live very soon. So just to give you a brief overview, if that was lots of information and you need it broken down a little bit more visually, here's some key kind of things that you could think about if you want to get involved with Great Big Green Week, and some timelines. So at the moment, we obviously have our community grants open for applications, and our website and events calendar is soon to go live. In May, we'll be having some more training sessions. So not only the training session we're running next week, but we continue to run training throughout the time in the run up to Great Big Green Week. So anything from how to promote your events, or you just want to do some more networking and meet with other community groups locally who are doing similar things, there'll be lots of opportunities between May and throughout the summer to get involved in training. As I mentioned, our large grants close in the beginning of May, and then in June, our smaller grants close as well. So just remember that, keep those dates in your mind, and I'll make sure to share a link in the chat in a moment with more information about those. So in a basic summary, how can you get involved with the Great Big Green Week? Well, step one could be to host your own event during the week. And obviously, as I mentioned, there's plenty of resources and funding available to help you get involved there. The second, if you haven't got the capacity to host an event, why not support an event? There might be groups working locally to you who want to run Great Big Green Week events, but you might not be able to run the full thing, but you want to help and support them. Maybe you could provide some space for them to access. Then support those groups. And obviously, please do come to any of our training sessions to find out more about what groups are doing locally. And then obviously, once the website has been populated with lots of fabulous events, you can come and find out more about what's happening locally. And also, if you're thinking, ooh, I could definitely run maybe one event, but I think it'd be really cool if in my local town or city or village, I really want to run a Great Big Green Week itself, but I can only run one event. Why not collaborate with other local groups? Reach out to people who maybe aren't usually involved in kind of climate conversations and see if you could host events together, and then perhaps join up and create a whole week yourself. Also, maybe there are things that some local groups are looking for that you could provide. Perhaps they've got some physical space that you don't have access to that you can team up with and collaborate. The Great Big Green Week is all about that. It's about meeting with other people, collaborating, communities coming together and sharing their love and celebration for nature and climate and all the fabulous things that we are all trying to do to combat climate change. So there are loads of different ways to get involved. That is the very basic overview. I realise that is quite a whistle-stop tour of the Great Big Green Week, but we wanted to give you a really good overview and then provide lots of opportunity for kind of conversation and chat and questions now as well. So, but if you do want any more information, mine and Mary's email address is on the screen, and we'll share a link to those in the chat as well, so you can see them. But we'd love to hear from you as well. For now, I will just stop sharing my screen so you can see our faces. And just, I guess, jump into the Q&A and see if anyone has any questions, unless Mary, you want to jump in and say anything you think I might have missed.
Thank you, Grace. That was a brilliant whistle-stop tour. Just wanted to let you know that as with most events, we have sort of differing themes on different years, and a lot of our focus this year and the messaging that you will see us starting to put out into social media as the months progress is all about future generations. So we will be focusing on how we protect and restore the planet essentially for the future generations to come. And we're going to be talking quite a bit about hope and the fierce hope that we have for restoring nature, restoring species, ensuring that children and grandchildren in the future have a world that they can live in, which is all the things that you would want it to be for them, rather than somewhere that is dealing with a rather negative burning bush, to use Joe's example from earlier.
Thanks. We'll come to the question. Well, the first question that's come in is, can you share the link to the resources, which is happening in the chat? And then can I share the chat afterwards? So yes, I will email everyone after the session, and I'll save the chat, but I'll delete all everyone saying hello to each other at the beginning, so that you just have the important links. Just also to say, one of the ideas, or one of the ambitions of Great Big Green Week, is that this demonstrates an outpouring of love for creation, how important it is, how much it matters to us. And people have different motivations, but people of faith come at it as this is God's gift of creation, and we love it and we care for it. And the people who live here, we love and we care for them, and it's really important to us. And we want to have that as a demonstration that's a real mandate for change, so that when we're asking for big change to happen in governments, and bigger than that, because we were all very excited about COP26 in Glasgow last year, but we have another one coming up in Egypt this year, and that will happen fairly shortly after the Great Big Green Week. And we need our leaders in this country and in the world to know that this matters, that the nature matters, that people matter, and we need to see action. So everything that you do is a part of that big picture, to say that we love and we care for this world and the gifts that God has given us, and we need you to act. So that's part of our motivation for doing what we do. So if that's something that really helps you to grasp what's going on, then really go for that. That's really important. Another angle on this, I think for churches, there are partnerships that we can make here that we have maybe not made before with other people who really care about the world and about nature, that haven't necessarily we haven't found an affinity with before, but we can in the future. So this is an opportunity for us as churches to reach and work together in partnership with groups that we may not otherwise have worked with. And the opposite is true. So groups and people that have a natural affinity with church may not have had a connection with nature and thinking about taking action on climate change. And this is so that's an opportunity to make those two connections. So off the top of my head, you may have a toddler group in your church that you have that link with, so you're already linked with them, but the toddler group may not have thought about climate change. Now they may well have, because it's the young people who are leading us on this, and even the smallest children might be in their mum's minds or their dad's minds or anyone. But if they haven't really thought about this before, you have a natural link with them and you can bring them into the climate conversation. Equally, there might be people in your neighborhood or in your community that have that climate conversation ongoing, but have never had that link with you as a church. So do think about those partnerships that you can create and the different conversations that you can start with people. We're sort of having half a conversation over here and half of it over there, and it'd be great to bring those two bits of the conversation together. And then the other thing I want to throw into the mix is we've been thinking about Cycle to Church Sunday, and there's a few conversations, there's a few bishops who are really keen about getting into the lycra and getting on their bikes. And so we've starting to think about some ideas about how we can link this idea about cycle to church with the season of creation and Great Big Green Week. So we may come up with something around getting bishops on their bikes and encouraging people to cycle to church. So that might be something that you want to do. You might want to say, this Sunday we're going to cycle to church, or you might think, oh, that's not going to work for us, but can you have a leave the car at home Sunday, where you can do lift sharing, so at least you're reducing some of the carbon. Or maybe you're going to have a bike repair session in your churchyard one Saturday or during the week. Or if your school is getting involved, I know a lot of schools try and encourage people to leave the car at home, park away, have a walking bus, all kinds of things. So if that is something that floats your boat, something around leaving the car at home, cycling, men in lycra, maybe not that, but those are the ideas that we're floating around at the moment. So if anyone's interested in that, do let me know, and we'll try and join all of that up together. So at this point, the Q&A box is empty, so I would encourage you all just to take 2 minutes to think, right, what is my burning question, and put it in the Q&A box, and then we'll see if Grace and Mary can answer it. So we'll just give you all a couple of minutes to think, add your question, and then we'll come to some of those.
Just while people are thinking, I just thought it would be good to just remind you all, because it was right at the beginning of the presentation, that Great Big Green Week is really very much a celebratory thing. And that's quite unusual in the climate sphere, because understandably there's lots of concerns and fears about climate and the future of our planet and nature and the people within it. But we really want to do something which enables people to celebrate all the good things that are happening, and to take hope and strength from the positive things that are already being done in local communities. So it's a really great opportunity to look at what's being done within your local areas and to really celebrate those things, and to maybe look at how your church or your church members or your church school could look at replicating some of those things. Could you be rewilding part of your churchyard? Could you have a solar panel that's, rather than the boiler, that's causing your, bringing in your heating? All the differing positive things that are happening in your local area. It's a really lovely opportunity to find a way to inspire people and make them feel empowered rather than powerless. And particularly for younger people, climate anxiety is really real. So to be able to be a source of hope for those young people with the things that you're talking about and celebrating in your events is also a really special thing to be able to do.
Thanks, Mary. That's really good to have that focus. And yeah, the celebration, definitely. And on a sunny day, that's much easier to remember, isn't it? So there are some questions coming in. I think we may be going to the wisdom of the room as well as the panel members here. Let's start with the top one. Does anyone know of any good plays about climate change, or which could be about climate change?
I can come in here a little bit and encourage people actually to come to our session next Wednesday, so it's 6 to 8 p.m. on the 27th of April, as we'll actually have some organisers who ran some, they did some climate change themed plays, and they also had some community singing as well. One of our organisers from Bridport will be coming along. So if there's no wisdom from the room, I'd really recommend people coming and listening to the session next week, because there's some great speakers who are coming to talk specifically about the plays they put on and the songs that they sang, and they'll have all the detail around that. So I'd push you to come along to that, but we'll also record that session and we can share that with you as well, Joe, so you can share it around.
Okay, thank you, Grace. And so if anybody here who knows of good plays, and there's Sheena's asked us a similar question about songs for community singing. If you've got good ideas for resources where people can look, then do put that in the chat. And then when I save the whole chat, then that will be there. That would be great. So, okay. Jean is asking about insurance cover for some of the events.
I have got a link, but Mary, do you want to jump in? Because I feel like you have got a lot of good knowledge around insurance cover.
Sure, I'm always happy to answer people's insurance questions. I've done a lot of it in the past. Broadly, it depends on what you're doing, and if you're running an event under the auspices of your church, check with your church office, because it may well be covered under your standard church public liability policy. That should be your first starting point, I would suggest. If you're looking to do something with other groups in the community in a joint event that might not be covered under your church policy, there is no legal requirement for voluntary organisations or community groups to take out public liability insurance when they're running an event. It's a choice that you can choose to make or not, depending on the risk that you think might be involved in your event and any concerns you might have about whether someone might make a claim against you. But within our resources, we've got more information about that.
Okay, yeah, so that's probably covered under your church. Check it there and check out on the resources on the website. Thank you. Are there any resources for links with local rivers? Ross and Archenfield Deanery are concerned about the health of the Wye. And then someone has suggested rights of rivers, but if there's any other suggestion to answer that.
I'd definitely recommend the Rivers Trust, who do lots of stuff locally, but also one of our member organisations is Surfers Against Sewage, obviously like naturally a sea-based organisation, but they do lots of work with rivers and sewage pollution in rivers as well. So I'd really recommend them, but I'll pop some links to those in the chat as well.
Okay, so look out for the links when you get the email after this event. We did the one about community singing. Could you tell us more about the grants, the amounts, how we apply, what they can fund, and what the chances of success might be?
Yes, absolutely. I will just repop the link to the funding in the chat. But essentially, we have around £100,000 to give out to community groups. We'd like to kind of split that between lots of different people in lots of different regions. So there's, I guess, a relatively high chance, depending on how many applicants we have, that will fund you. And if you've got an exciting idea that sounds new and engages new audiences, that's the stuff that we're really keen to support and promote. You'll see on the website, we have like key criteria that we'd love to support, but your activity or event only needs to hit one of the following criteria. Sorry, I'm just reading off my other screen so you can see what I'm saying. So it's about empowering local groups to make connections locally. So that piece around how you connect with other local groups. Does the event that you're running help you connect with other people locally? Then yeah, that would give you some plus points. There's either also activities that are led by or in partnerships with groups who are underrepresented within the climate movement. So we're talking about ethnic minority groups, people with disabilities, or economically deprived groups. If the work that you're doing engages with those communities, then we'd love to hear from you. If they're in a location with no existing Green Week or related activities, so I've seen some in the chat, there's like the St Albans Sustainability Festival. But if you're in a town or location where there's no current green activities happening, or that you know have happened in the past, then we're really keen to support that, because we want to be seeing lots of activity happening in places that it hasn't happened before. If your event engages with local politicians or councillors, that's happening within that constituency, so that piece around having conversations with politicians and making sure that there's policy and things in place there, we're really keen to support that. And as Mary mentioned, that kind of intergenerational supporting, kind of creating a better future for our young people, anything that's kind of across generations and encouraging intergenerational dialogue, then we're definitely keen to hear from you. On the website, there is a full list of things that we can fund and we can't fund, but the kind of highlights are around like equipment, one-off event costs, staff costs. So if it's directly supporting Great Big Green Week activity and you need a staff member to coordinate things, we can support that. Transport, utilities and volunteer expenses, or any publicity kind of items, so flyers, social media advertising, that kind of thing. There are 3 different sizes of grants. So we've got £200 to £500. So a smaller grant might cover some like basic costs that will just tick off a few things. We've got medium grants, so anything from £500 to £5,000, and then obviously large grants. So if you are looking to apply for those larger grants, so between £5,000 to £10,000, there's obviously going to be less of those because we have we don't want to give everything out as a large grant, so we want to give out lots of small grants as well. So you're probably more likely if you apply for a smaller grant to get that money than you would be for a larger grant, just to balance that out. And obviously there's a list in there of who can apply as well, so it gives you a bit of an overview of who you need to be to apply. We can't accept applications from individuals, but if you're applying as a church, then we can absolutely accept that application. I don't think I saw anyone in here from Scotland, but if there is anyone from Scotland, I'd really encourage you to go to our sister organisation who are based in Scotland, Stop Climate Chaos Scotland. They're running an event in Scotland called Climate Fringe around the same time, and they have community grants funding specifically to support that stuff happening in Scotland, because they've got some really tailored support they can give community groups there. I feel like that was a very whistle-stop tour, but all of that information is on that link for the funding website as well, so please do go there for more information. And there's an email address at the bottom as well, so if you've got more questions and you want to have another chat through, I'm really happy to do that as well.
Thanks, Grace. So there's a question about how much detail that's required. I think the answer to that is there's a form that you fill in, so I think that will answer that question. Have a look at the form. But particularly think about the larger grants. Are there any particular criteria around those?
Yeah, I can see as well that point around does it need to be specifically within Great Big Green Week? Yes, like for those grant projects, we'd really like them to fall within the Great Big Green Week, because obviously the reason we do it within a specific period is to make lots of noise within 1 week. So we'd really like to support activity that's happening in that week. Obviously there'll be stuff that'll happen in the run up to that to make that happen, but we'd really like to see that happening there. The criteria is all the same across the board, so whatever size of grant you're applying to, the criteria is the same, and that's all listed at the top, those kind of criteria around connections and partnerships and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. And on that note, there was a question in the chat which Mary answered, but just so everybody knows, if you're doing an event that doesn't fall in that week, can you still put it on the website? And the answer to that is yes. And we are encouraging you, if it works for you better, because it's a whole season of creation, to do something not specifically in that week, do it, and do register it onto the website and make it all part of the same movement. It's about building that movement for change, and the numbers coming together is really important. So yes, if you're not doing it in that week, then please do still register it on the website. That's really, really helpful and important. A quick question, the training session next week, will that be recorded?
Yes, the simplest answer I've ever given.
Excellent. Here's one about publicity. Last year we found that people had not heard of the Great Big Green Week. Any ideas for publicity?
That is a great question, Anne. What we'll be doing is one of the other bits of training that we'll be doing is around kind of getting publicity and media attention. So there will be some extra resources to help with that and kind of get the word out. I think one piece of knowledge and advice from people I had conversations with last year during Great Big Green Week is don't underestimate the power of word of mouth. I think obviously in this day and age, we assume that we can kind of share stuff on social media or digitally, or putting a poster up in a local location, but actually the word of mouth is really powerful, and lots of people have got really strong connections within their community. So talk about it would be my top tip, but do come to some more training sessions that we're running soon, and there'll be a resource on that as well, so do check those out when they go live.
And just to add to that, we've got lots of assets, lots of beautiful images that can be used on Facebook and social media and those kind of things. So we're really happy to share those with you. And we have, of course, been working to make sure that far more people this year than last year hear about Great Big Green Week. We're already sort of doing things like, we've got pieces that will be running in things like National Trust magazines the month before Great Big Green Week, to just really make sure that a bigger section of the population is aware of Great Big Green Week as we can possibly get to, using all the differing angles that we've got.
Lovely, thank you. And the last question that's here is similar to some of the others, another request for suggestions about short films that could be shown. So again, I'll ask Grace and Mary to answer, but if you have ideas, can you put them in the chat? And Gordon, can you put, if you can find a link to your suggestion, can you share that in the chat as well? If not, just write the answer, because the question and answers don't get captured in the same way. So if you can just put that in the chat, then it won't get lost. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would definitely second Gordon's suggestion of the 2040 film. I've heard like a lot of good reviews about it. But I think we'll also have a film list as well on the website. We had one last year, so I'll make sure that that's shared as well. But Mary, have you got any things that spring to mind straight away?
There's a new film that's launching next week that we'll add to the film list, which is about clothing and fashion and how that impacts people around the world, and from where it starts to how it ends up with us, and the impact that we can have with the choices that we make. That has been very beautifully filmed and is also very impactful. So I think that's a good one to consider if you're doing an event that would engage with an audience that cares about what they wear.
My first port of call for things like that would often be a Christian Aid, and they have a film called Thank You for the Rain, which you might, that'll be more along the climate justice angle, but if that's the angle that you want to go for, and it's an angle that really resonates in a lot of churches, then you could have a look at what is on offer on the Christian Aid website. There's another question just come up. Oh, there's the link. Hang on. Thanks, Gordon. That's great. So that's all the questions now, I think, unless anyone else has got anything else they want to ask Mary or Grace while we're here. We've got a few more minutes if anyone, anything by David Attenborough is a suggestion. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thank you all for coming. I hope that lots of you have got lots of ideas, and we'd love to hear about what you're doing. So as well as obviously you register your events on the Great Big Green Week website so that other people can see them and join in and find out about what you're doing. But if there's something that you want to let me know that you're up to, and I can tweet and share, or just share among the networks that we have within the Church of England, then please do let me know as well. That'd be and hearing about events like that are always, I find them so really encouraging. Especially when we're all working from home, we're sitting in our little boxes, aren't we? And we don't know what's going on. And when I hear an email, oh, we're having this event and it sounds really exciting, I get really thrilled. We might be able to put some stories out through the Church of England news as well. So if you've got especially a bigger event that's reaching out into some of those different communities that we've not engaged with before, that's the kind of news story that our media team love. So anything like that you want to send my way, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much. I'll give Grace and Mary the last word.
Well, just to say thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to see what you get to, and obviously, yeah, do share what you're getting up to with us. And as I said, there are tons of resources and tons of training opportunities. So please do keep in contact with us. We'd love to see you at those, and we really look forward to seeing you at the Great Big Green Week. Mary?
Everything Grace said, and if you do have any questions, please do drop us an email. We genuinely mean it when we say we'd love to hear from you, and we are really excited about having lots of you involved in Great Big Green Week.
Thank you very much.